Her name is Sarah. She is an 8-year-old happy, vibrant kid born into a middle-income family in Illinois. Her childhood was much like everyone else's in the beginning. When her grandmother was still living, Sarah was always a happy child. When she was 4, she could memorize essential histories and quickly do her classwork. Her grandmamma died when she was 5. Her story started to change after this incident. The teachers knew Sarah as a vibrant child who always beams with a great smile and a genuine hardworking spirit. She was active, playing with her mates, laughing at jokes, and making the best of everything. No dull moments for Sarah. She was a curious and passionate kid. When Sarah was 7, she returned from school one day and saw a stray dog bugging beside a tree. She took pity on the poor dog and took her home. Her dad was at home when she returned with the stray dog. He never flinched at the gesture, but told Sarah to take care of it herself, and if it died, she should bury it herself. Sarah nurtured the sickly dog back to health. She named the dog Jimmy, and this canine became a close friend to Sarah. She fed the dog a small portion of her food and moved around wherever she was. Everyone in the neighborhood called them the little inseparable duo. Jimmy was about 8 months old when Sarah saved her from the streets. Sarah's dad was an absent father, and her mom, who was never always at home, got sacked from her job due to conduct. She stayed more at home. Her presence was supposed to be great for Sarah's little charmer, but the reverse was the case. Sarah's mom is Jennifer Thompson, while her dad is Rich Thompson. Sarah's mom started to giving her tasks that were clearly beyond her age. In time, Sarah's mom warned her never to feed her dog in her presence. She said seeing her feed the dog as a child irritates her. When Sarah was 8, her mom became more frustrated. Her attitude became terrible, and she resorted to physical beatings and mental abuse. For any mistakes, the mom always reminded her that she would get the worst beating of her life if she repeated it. The day Sarah broke a ceramic plate, her mother pushed her into an electric fence, and she watched as she writhed on the ground, groaning and in agony. That day, when Sarah's dad came home in the evening, he was unhappy with the bruises he saw on Sarah's torso, but he never made any difference. He is an alcoholic and a dysfunctional father. After the weekend, Sarah left for school and returned in the afternoon. She usually feeds her dog before leaving for school, and a neighbor provides Jimmy at noon. 1 week after the electric fence incident, Sarah went to get her hair done. She didn't take her dog along because of heavy traffic and was going with a friend. When she returned, she found her precious dog dead in the backyard. Sarah cried her soul out and groaned for hours. She proceeded to ask her mother what had happened. Her mother blatantly told her that her dog Jimmy sniffed her food, so she hit it with a rod and killed the animal for contaminating her food. She killed the animal cruelly just for her cruel enjoyment and satisfaction. She has always been picking on the dog for no just cause. Sarah writhed in pain and kept hoping that Jimmy would breathe again. The poor dog suffered a blunt injury and brain damage and died. No one would have guessed the mother could do such a cruel thing to a needy pet. Poor Sarah mourned her dog and never tasted anything throughout that day. Sarah started recounting her early childhood and remembered that her mother had never said, "I love you," to her. She has never felt her arms, nor has she wrapped her arms around her mother, even to give the slightest motherly embrace. Sarah has made conscious efforts as a child to get close to her mother, but her mother kept putting her off and declining any physicals. Her late grandmother was the only mother she had. The evil woman moved from bad to worse about a month after the last incident. She became a heavy alcoholic, neglecting her child's basic needs, and made serious attempts to shun her from complaining anything to her. She always referred her to meet her father or whomever she wanted. Though a vibrant child, Sarah started to lose her vibrancy, especially after losing her pet. Her bond with this little pet was massive. She missed her pet but suppressed many emotions because crying worsened the punishments. She started feeling very scared of her mother and was never close to her dad. The dad was absent, never gave any fatherly love, and was a heavy drunkard. Hence, she wasn't close to him to begin with. Over the past few months, the alcoholic evil mother started worse psychological, physical, and sexual abuses. Sarah didn't complain to anyone because she always warned her that she would kill her the same way she killed her little dog if she complained. Sarah's mom locked her up in the closet at any slightest unwarranted provocation. Her hands and feet were bound with handkerchiefs, and she was forced to stay there for hours. When Sarah started weeping, the mother would pull out a belt with buckles and use this belt to beat Sarah in her torso, back, and buttocks. The continuous beating suffered over every minor error left scars on her body. Sarah became increasingly afraid of everything and tried reporting the incident to her daddy. When Sarah's mother got wind of this, she did the worst. As usual, her mother bound her hands. This time, she didn't leave her there to writhe in pain. Instead, she used her nails to pinch Sarah's vagina. It was so painful that Sarah was shouting. She gagged her mouth and threatened to throw her from the stairs if she kept trying to scream. Sarah's mom's face was that of a satisfied villain who tortures her enemies. After the pinching, she told Sarah that she was doing this to her because she tried to report her mother to her father. That was her punishment for daring to write to anyone. Mrs. Jennifer started having many adulterous affairs in the house, even when her daughter was around. On one of the days, Sarah returned early from school and refused to greet her lover out of annoyance. She beat her up for disrespect and warned Sarah to be submissive to her lovers. She also told Sarah that she had no right to get mad, complain, or try funny moves. She understood that she owned her and would correct her if she deemed fit. She had never hit her in the face before all these physical abuses. Sarah thought it was because she had a pretty face, but she avoided the beginning so that an outsider wouldn't notice the physical abuse. She wanted to conceal all evidence of torture and abuse. The mental, physical, and sexual mistreatment got so deep into Sarah that one of her teachers noticed a bruise on her leg. Sarah denied it and said she sustained an injury during games. During Christmas, Mr. Rich, the absent dad, got Sarah some clothes. The man didn't get any gifts for his wife. This kind gesture showed towards Sarah infuriated Sarah's mom, and she started cooking plans for it. She believed that the clothes were a mistake for Sarah. She took her to the showers and made her stay there with the new clothes while she bathed. She presented her with a nasty naked doll out of the dumpster and forced Sarah to use it as her Christmas present. She blatantly told her that she never wanted her and wished she had died in childbirth. The mistreatments continued, and Sarah kept bottling up the problems. Sarah is 10 years old, but the abuses have increased tenfold. When Sarah dumped the naked doll, she made a severe case from it. A few days after the naked doll incident, Sarah's mother humiliated her again with emotional and physical abuse. She started by threatening Sarah with fear of beating her to a stupor and repressed her with all abusive memories. One time, she hit her head with a golf club. Sarah was starved that day because she forgot to turn off the gas in the kitchen. The years of physical and mental abuse took away Sarah's vibrancy. She started feeling horrific all the time and would burst out into extreme tears when sleeping. Her life became traumatized and hellish. The abuses never stopped, even with the heartbreaking nightmares. Sarah started avoiding going home after school. She loved staying in school, even after the class, and would go home when everyone had left. The teacher in charge of her grade noticed this awkward attitude, but couldn't place many worries on it. Some lads played until it was time to leave school, hence, she didn't see it as a big deal. These horrific acts happened until Sarah was 12 years. It worsened in the past year, and the repercussions have plagued Sarah's life for the past 9 months. She entered a state of psyche limbo and had no courage to report to authorities. The abuses have been mostly indoors, but Sarah's mother started showing increasingly erratic behaviors due to her narcotic and alcohol misuse. Unfortunately, Sarah kept bottling up all their emotions and putting up a brutal facade, face, and smiles. Everyone around her never knew the hell she was in or the pain she had been masking. She masked it very well, but her subconsciousness still disturbed her. Before the Easter season, Sarah's school usually had an annual Parents and Teachers Association meeting, PTA. Every child must have a representative. Sarah's mom was to represent her because her father had been away for about 3 months. Sarah's mother, Jennifer, anxiously wanted to be in the meeting because she feared her daughter might reveal some of her secrets during the session. In the meeting, every parent sat with their kids or wards. Sarah was sitting with her mother, but the body language was slightly off and unnatural. In attendance were some of the bigwigs in child abuse and molestation struggles. Physically, other children had that motherly warmth, fatherly embrace and love. Sarah's mom tried to put up an act, but her daughter seemed visibly uncomfortable and uneasy. Sarah was disappointed that no one could understand her suffering. She became restless because she thought her tormentor might abuse and torture her after the meeting. Nothing unusual happened during the meeting, but one of the staff took cognizance of their disjoint attitude toward Sarah. The officer for child welfare went up to Sarah's teacher and tried to inquire how she had been faring. Sarah's immediate class teacher gave positive reports on her academic performance and remarked that her grades had dropped over the past few months. The child welfare officer became curious about the cause and asked the teacher to self-examine Sarah with utmost privacy. The teacher agreed to do that and called Sarah the following day to ask her if everything was all right. Sarah wanted to open up, but her mother's threats were too heavy and knew in her mind. She was too scared to alter any sentence implicating her mother because the mom had threatened that she would murder her if she ever complained to anyone about what happened in the house. The teacher, sensing hidden dangers in Sarah's face, decided to do a personal self-examination. She called a nurse to come and examine Sarah. The nurse didn't see signs of abuse on the face region, but proceeded to explore her inner body parts. The nurse saw scar marks on her lower back region and a pinch mark on her private area. The nurse asked what caused this pinch mark. Sarah didn't respond. The teacher and the nurse assured Sarah that no harm would come to her and promised to take her out of that house if she told the truth. At this point, Sarah has gotten unique assurance and decided to open up. "It was my mother that pinched me there. That is why that place has a dark mark," Sarah said. At first, the nurse was taken aback and thought Sarah talked gibberish. The nurse was bewildered and asked for clarification again. "Your mother did this to you?" Sarah replied, "Yes, my mother did that to me and has not stopped either." She opened up and told them what had been happening. She also revealed the verbal abuse, other physical abuse sites, and the emotional abuses she has been giving out to her ever since her grandmother died. The nurse burst out into tears and went out to get someone. Within a few minutes, she returned with a team from child welfare. They came into the room where Sarah was being examined and interviewed. They took pictures of her scarred body parts and called her to join them in their vehicle. They also took recordings when Sarah was narrating stories of how she threw lamps at her, punched her stomach, pinched her down there, bound her tiny hands, and how she also hit her with a golf club once. Their faces were filled with bewilderment and anger, and they asked her to direct them straight to their house. Sarah knew that exact direction to their home, so locating it was pretty simple. The human rights activities and child welfare were bashed into the house. Sarah's mom was arrested. They searched the house, and in her possession, they also found wraps of narcotics and other contraband drugs. She was whisked away and Sarah was taken to a rehab center. Sarah's dad was also arrested on accounts of negligence and abuse. The good people of the child's care support helped Sarah get back to her usual self. A loving and wealthy family later adopted her. Following 6 months of trials, the couple was sentenced to 14 years and 3 years imprisonment, respectively. Exactly 6 years after the incident, Sarah has regained her self-esteem and now schools in a prestigious high school in the States. She adopted a pet dog named after her former dog, Jimmy. Sarah was determined and later became a speaker for survivors, CPS workers, and children's welfare units. She became a successful therapist by profession and has been putting smiles on faces of others. Her horrible history turned into a storyline of her present colorful life. She uses herself to motivate, encourage, and educate people who survived or are battling abuse. Sarah got married at 32 and now has a lovely family.
His single mother raised Dan because his father divorced his mom and left them when he was just 3 months old for reasons unknown to him. Han, Dan's mother, was optimistic that her husband, Dan's father, would return until she received the worst news of her life. She was at work when a colleague told her Dan's father had remarried. That must have been why he divorced. It was because just a few months after he left for no reason, he had moved on. He must have been seeing the other woman all along. Ever since then, Han didn't remarry. The decision wasn't all planned out, though, because she only thought to remain single for a very few years, until Dan would be mature enough to take care of himself and his potential half-siblings. So she dedicated her whole time to working to provide for their needs. Significantly, the basics: food, clothes, and shelter. Mrs. Han was working hard and could be categorized under the upper middle class in her city. In other words, they were average citizens who were not satisfied, but as well not starving. Mrs. Han's perception and decision about remarrying, once Dan reaches his adolescence stage, didn't take long before it changed. This is due to her stories about her step-parents, which worsen daily. These stories are, of course, unpleasant and often harmful. If it's not news of a stepfather maltreating and physically abusing his stepchild, it would be that of a stepmother harassing her stepchild. All of this news together didn't encourage her to settle down with any other man, as she didn't want anyone to ill-treat her dear son. This continued for years as she didn't give any man a chance. When Dan was 10, he used to come back late from school, as he was preparing for his high school examination, leaving Han lonely as there was no one to chit-chat to or gist unimportant topics during the day, and by night Dan ate and goes to bed to prepare for the next day. He gets home exhausted and sleeps off without eating dinner. Han, on the other hand, closes around 2 p.m., and she has no close friends except for a few colleagues who are casual friends. She only enjoys Dan's company and doesn't like it when anyone pries into their privacy, not even the neighbor next door. She got tired at some point. Watching a movie would have been a great escape from boredom, but she's terrible at it. She practically dozes off each time she watches a movie, drooling all over the place, and often Dan makes jest of her. So she stopped seeing movies as she concluded that it wasn't her thing. The boredom reached its peak, and she became a game lover. She sensed that as an excellent means to keep herself busy, but it didn't work long. Out of loneliness, she decided to try some dinner dates, even though she had decided not to date anymore. She only wanted to pass the time. Han was 39 and would be clocking 40 in a few months, but I guess she was still attractive and radiant as men didn't stop chasing after her. No doubt, Han is a beautiful woman. She looked so tender and young, even younger than her age, that many mistakes her for being in her late 20s. Probably because she eats good food and a lot of fruit, some men find it difficult to believe she truly has a son. Instead, they think she claimed to avoid dating men. Them. At times she gets frustrated and gets out of her way to prove herself, showing them Dan's pictures on her phone so they could believe her. Of all the things, she never welcomed any man into her house because she didn't know what Dan would think of her. She instead sees these men during the day but never flirts with any and turns down their offers when they ask her out on a date. Change is constant, they say. Han started going on dates. She could go on a few, but the last one made her stop. She did not mind hugging her loneliness with her whole arms. She met this guy online, and he asked her out on a date, and she agreed. The location wasn't far from home, so it was more accessible for her to head home quickly before Dan got back, because he got back around 7:45 p.m. every day. The date was scheduled for 6 p.m. Han had been there around that time, but the new guy didn't reach there until some minutes past 7 p.m. While he went, he apologized for coming late. Han said it was okay, but she wouldn't be staying long since she had waited for over an hour and her son would soon be back from school. "You have a damn son?" the guy asked. Han nodded in affirmation. Han must have forgotten to mention it during their chats, because she doesn't hesitate to tell every guy she meets, but in this case, she and the new guy had only known for a few days, and everything happened so fast. The guy didn't listen to her. He flared up and called her unprintable names for not informing him earlier, as he doesn't do single mothers. When Han was about to explain why she hadn't mentioned it, the guy hurled curses at her and her son and walked out on her. Han felt so embarrassed as she left the location crying. She was more pained that she couldn't defend her innocent son in the presence of that ill-mannered guy. That made her conclude to resume her everyday life, irrespective of the level of loneliness she encounters. After some weeks to keep herself focused, she started working as a freelancer online, as she was a professional website designer. This became their everyday lives. Han didn't remarry, but could take care of herself and Dan with her little earnings, and they lived fine. Han ensured her son wasn't intimidated by his colleagues, especially for not having his father around. She tried to get him virtually everything he asked for, and made sure he attended the best university in the city, even if she had to struggle to pay his tuition. 15 years later, Dan was done with school and started working. He lives a vivid life, works in a reputable organization, and earns excellent money. He has a girlfriend, Tilda, and a best friend, Tony, who lives with him. He was staying in a different state from where he grew up. Dan feeds and clothes them, and every week they go to parties where he lavishes money on drinks. On a fateful day, Han called her son for some financial help, as she needed to pay for her rent. But Dan turned her down, claiming that he was broke, but she should call after a week. After 1 week, Han called her son again, since he had promised her, but he said he had been tight and exhausting and claimed he was busy. He told her to call back after 3 days. Han didn't hesitate to call back, as she needed the money for rent badly. This time, Dan stopped picking up his mom's calls. At this point, the mom observed he's been lying all along, because she knows he earns considerably every month. She doesn't know where he stays. Maybe she would even have confronted him physically. When Han could not pay her rent, she was kicked out of the house. She wasn't allowed to pick a pen, as she was threatened with being arrested. She had no friends, as her only companion is her son, who suddenly turns against her. The son has stopped picking up her calls, and she has no family in the city. Han has stopped working for a while now, but she was able to gather her remaining little pension and savings to rent a stuffy single room. She has no mattress, pillow, or possessions except for 2 clothes and a wrapper. She sleeps on the floor, wearing one cloth while she lies on her wrapper every night, and every morning she washes her clothes to wear at night. Feeding was difficult, as she only ate once a day, often in the afternoon, because she had to manage the money she had left. Sooner than expected, Karma visited Dan as he fell sick. It was a severe illness. Tilda and Tony had rushed him to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with some weird defect in his body system. Hence, surgery was the only solution. He has the money to pay for his surgery. Still, the straw that broke the camel's back was part of the blood replacement, as he needed a blood transfusion from a donor that matched his own immediately after the surgery, as he would have lost a lot of blood during the surgery. It was urgent, so he summoned Tilda, his girlfriend, for a donor test, but she said she would come later, and before Dan could say another word, she had cut the call. Immediately Dan called Tony, severally, but he didn't pick up, and when he eventually did, he claimed he was busy and will come later. Dan was so disappointed but more uneasy as his pains persisted. He later thought of his mom and called her. The mom, hearing his voice over the phone, figured out that something was wrong with her son. Dan explained himself, and Han immediately asked for the hospital's address. She needed money to travel down, so she ran to the street to beg for money so she could reach there on time. After some hours, she accumulated cash and traveled to meet her son. Dan's case had worsened, and it seemed like he would die soon. The mom had compassion for her son and asked them to run a test. Fortunately, her blood matched, and the transfusion procedures began. It was a success, as both Dan and his mother were okay. Dan regretted his evil actions. He sobbed bitterly as he pleaded for his mom's forgiveness, blaming his stupidity and devilish friends. The mother also cried, forgave him, and after 3 days they were discharged. Dan chased Tilda and Tony out of his house and begged his mother to move in with him, as he had 3 flats. He promised not ever to forsake her. Han was happy again, and they lived in the same compound happily ever after. This story shows that the impacts of mothers cannot be sidelined now or ever. They are rare gems and are small gods. A mother will always come through, regardless of her child's shortcomings. Hence, as a child, you must love your mother, irrespective of her flaws. No friend, platonic, casual, close, or best friend, can make up for the role of a mother. Place no friend above your mother. As kids, we must always take care of our mother, and do not wait for the right time, as there is no such thing as the right time in this case. Don't wait till you start working or earning big. Don't wait till you start driving your dream car. As a kid, you can take care of your mom by helping out in the kitchen. It's not about money or life's achievements, but the act of responsibility. Take care of your mom by being there when they need you. Not everyone will get a second chance like Dan.
Debbie has been on the run for a new job for a while now. She has been staying up from dusk till dawn on her PC, surfing the internet to get first-hand information about any vacancy. Things, no doubt, have been tough for Debbie ever since she lost her loving husband. Debbie's late husband was a military man. He was in the U.S. Army for years. He slightly lost his life in war after his daughter was born. Debbie became a widow and a single mother simultaneously. Her family was the only one she could fall upon, but unfortunately they neglected her after the death of her husband. According to them, they weren't ready to help because they had warned Debbie before the husband's death not to get married to him because of his profession. They didn't want Debbie to get married to a soldier because, in their opinion, soldiers are liable to die young. So, for this reason, they all deserted Debbie for being disobedient and following her wish only. Debbie had to cater to herself and her new baby girl. In this quest, she enrolled in 2 part-time jobs. She did one from dusk till noon and resumed the other from afternoon till dusk. That was the work pattern for Debbie for years. That was how she could provide the basic things her kid needed. She was a great mother. Regardless of her tight schedule, she ensured to provide time for her baby girl, Victoria. She dropped her off in the morning and picked her up in the evening. They lived in a mini apartment, and she had a smooth relationship with her immediate neighbors. When Victoria clocked 3, Debbie thought it was wise to enroll her in a nursery school. While she had the bump of Victoria and her husband was still alive, they often talked about how they would raise their kids. Debbie's husband assured her that his kids would get the best treatment any parent would offer, starting from their introductory level to adulthood, irrespective of what it would cost him. And even after her husband's death, Debbie promised to fulfill his promises, as that was the least she could do in his respect. After all, that was what he wanted for his kid. Debbie enrolled baby Victoria in the best school in the city. Although expensive, she was ready to bet on it with her life savings. It wasn't too difficult to keep up with it at first, since she had planned well and saved for a day. However, she could only go for a short while. Her savings got exhausted within 2 terms. She was living a big man lifestyle for her kid. She thought of calling it to quit at some point, but her husband's purpose wouldn't let her. She decided that instead of giving her daughter a low-standard education, it would be better to increase her income to balance the high standards she envisaged for Victoria. Fortunately, Debbie was able to secure a job with a big firm. It was more like a contract that was to last for 2 years. It was a big one for her and a breakthrough that came at the best time. To top it all off, she was allowed to work from home. This allowed her to spend more time with her baby girl after school hours than before. Her job wasn't a hectic or tasking one. She was the firm's auditor, and she did her work diligently. Most of their meetings and conferences took place on Zoom. This went on till Victoria was 5. She was done with nursery and set for pre-high school education, which would cost much more tuition fees. Debbie's contract had just expired as it was 2 years already. Unfortunately, the firm was not ready to retain her. This had nothing to do with incompetence or unsatisfied service, but strictly the organization's rules. They hire auditors who come highly recommended every 2 years. They preferred to shuffle auditors because of 2 reasons. Their excuses were that they didn't want anyone feeling entitled to their company, a significant reason why they made their auditors work from home. Secondly, they understand the post is big and pays handsomely with just little work. They didn't want a single person to enjoy the benefits of that. Hence, they instead shuffle among certified auditors. The reasons seemed lame to Debbie, but there was nothing she could do about it. They owned their company after all, and were free to do what they deemed best. Before the contract expired, Debbie was able to buy a car with the hope of paying up installments, since she had other things to sort. She was to pay on an agreed date until she could complete the payment and gain full car ownership. Meanwhile, failure to pay the money for each month in 3 consecutive months would result in losing the vehicle. She was back to job hunting. She was back in the labor market. She spoke with a friend who told her about a conceded vacancy at a profound company in town after months of intense job searching. The interview was restricted to recommendations. You won't secure a job with the company if you do not come highly recommended. The company only interviewed prospects and potential employees on weekends, Saturday to be precise. That was weird too, but all of that didn't matter. All she hoped for was to get a job to meet up with her outstanding bills. She had to go with Victoria because it was a weekend, and she didn't want to leave her home alone. When she got to the company, she met up with the interviewer. He looked well-suited and composed. He didn't bother questioning her about her personal life or why she had decided to bring her daughter to her interview. He asked professional questions only. Debbie ensured to give the best response to every statement. She was careful with her words, and she didn't want to be flawed to avoid excuses from the interview for not hiring her. The interviewer asked her why she thought she deserved the position. She went further to explain how she had been able to work with the big firm for 2 years with no negative remarks. The curious interviewer asked her, "If you were as good as you claimed, what was your name again?" "Miss Debbie, sir," she quickly chipped in. "Yes, Miss Debbie, if you were as good as you claimed, why did the previous organization you worked with sack you?" She smiled and managed to explain the nature of the work as it was based on a contract after a brief detailed explanation. The interviewer nodded in satisfaction. He looked impressed. However, he told Debbie he wished he could help, but the position vacant was not for an auditor, which was Debbie's specialization, and he was sorry that the company would not be able to employ her. Debbie tried convincing him to change his mind. She explained how desperate she needed the job. She pointed at Victoria, sitting innocently playing with toys. She promised to take some personal and virtual classes and even seminars to understand what she needed to do. She assumed she was going to work twice as much as she worked for her previous company. The interviewer told her he understood how Debbie felt more than Debbie had pointed out. He told her that his boss, the company's owner, had given them a stern warning not to hire or employ an amateur in a critical position. He said that he would try as much as possible to help Debbie by linking her up with his aunt, who owned a company that needed an auditor, and hopefully she would get the job. He told Debbie to drop her contact, and should there be a development, after informing his aunt if she agrees to fix up an appointment, he will put a call through to Debbie. Debbie thanked him for being thoughtful to help, for his compassion, even though he didn't know her from Adam. She called out to Victoria as they made their way out of the interviewer's office. The interviewer waved at Victoria, and she waved back with a bright smile. "What a beautiful kid," the interviewer commented. As they left, they approached where Debbie had parked her car. Surprisingly, she saw a young man trying to lock her car tires. She anxiously questioned the young man's act. The man ignored her questions and instead replied to her with another question. "Aren't you Miss Debbie Pax?" Debbie's eyebrows raised a bit after hearing this. This person must know me, she thought within herself as she managed to answer the question. The man introduced himself as a worker from the company where Debbie got her car with the agreement to pay on installment. He claimed that he had been directed to forelock the car as Debbie had refused to pay her installment for 3 consecutive months, which was the company's rule that she signed and agreed to. Debbie tried pleading with the young man, but he explained that his hands were tied as he was only deployed for a purpose he had to do. While at that, Victoria sighted a wallet that was some meters away. She tapped her mom to inform her, but Debbie was engrossed in what the young man was doing to his car and didn't concentrate on Victoria. Victoria walked down to where the wallet was lying and picked it up. Miraculously, she found well-stacked cash notes in the wallet. She took it and ran back to her mom to show her what she had just seen. The young man had left. Debbie was shocked at the money Victoria had found in the wallet. She counted it, and it was around $5,000. Victoria asked if that was enough to repossess her car, and she answered yes. Victoria advised that she pay them and get her car back. Debbie, however, lectured that taking someone else's property, regardless of how big or small, shouldn't be taken without the person's consent. She assured me that she would not touch the money but return to the company she had just left. Turning back, she found a small piece of paper in the wallet conveying the address and phone number of the wallet's owner. She concluded to call the number and afterward locate the address. She spoke with the man who directed her to the address in the wallet. Debbie headed to the place with Victoria. On getting there, they met a man who seemed to be in his middle 40s. Debbie asked if he was the one he was talking to over the phone, and he confirmed it. While Debbie was about to explain how her young girl came across the wallet, the man cut her short, introducing himself to her. In his words, he said, "My name is Dan Rock. I am the CEO of the popular The Rock Group of companies." Debbie was wowed. She had always heard about the brand, but never knew what the CEO looked like. At this point, her attention had grown and her curiosity to 100%. Dan Rock continued, "Every year, I do a social experiment, and this is what I do. I dropped my wallet, stacked up with cash in my wallet with an address to reach when eventually found. I have been doing this for the past 15 years, and I'm glad to tell you that you are the first person to call me." At this moment, Debbie was lost for words. All that came out of her mouth were repeated wows as she tried to comprehend the revelation. Dan Rock told Debbie that she had made him believe that there are still great and honest people on Earth. He said to her that the money in the wallet belonged to her, and that wasn't all. He told her the house they were in, which he added in the address in the wallet, was one of his houses, and if Debbie loved it, the house would become hers henceforth. Debbie couldn't believe her ears. She thought it was all a prank and cautioned Dan Rock to stop pulling her leg. But Dan Rock couldn't be more serious as he told her he was serious. Victoria jumped and hugged Dan Rock as she appreciated him and told him they loved the house. Debbie was teary at this point, and she thanked Dan Rock continuously as she still found it hard to comprehend what had just happened. Dan Rock instead expressed his gratitude to Debbie for being honest and not being like the rest. He left afterward. While Debbie and Victoria were still thanking God for the marvelous thing he had just done, a strange call came in. It was the interviewer. He called to inform Debbie that he had spoken with his aunt and she would love to meet her. They fixed an appointment for the following week. Debbie was able to secure the job. She repossessed her car alongside, and she was able to enroll her daughter in the school of her choice. Indeed, honesty pays more than wages. It is not something we prepare for because you don't know when it will pave the way for you. The best thing is to learn to be honest naturally and not pretend to be honest. Our honesty can also be tested, just like Debbie's case. The wallet came when she needed help with her car. What could be more tempting? Many would mistake that for God's blessings. Honesty is a great virtue, and everyone should have it. It has a significant role in changing our world and making it more habitable. The question now is, will you be honest like Debbie? You should. It will help our planet.
As soon as Tina's husband died, a whole series of trials collapsed on her family. Tina had to raise her daughter Kira on her own, delve into the family business, and solve all the problems that her husband, Alex, used to deal with. Not only was Alex's death a devastating blow for Tina, but her daughter's personal life began to bring trouble. Tina did not have time to raise her daughter, so the bright feelings of love became strong for Tina. Tina considers herself the happiest in the world. She would have a loving husband. They had been together since September when they, first-year students, were sent to help harvest the harvest. Hardworking and dexterous, Alex, who immediately relieved the girls from the suffering of carrying buckets with beets and potatoes, was liked by many then. However, he did not openly show signs of sympathy to anyone. Knowing from his father and grandfather the tricks of life in weather conditions, the boy spoiled everything with incredibly delicious food. Several times, with the permission of the mentor, he and several other students went fishing, and then the chefs of the local canteen prepared fragrant fish soup. Much later, when he and Tina became young specialists and even celebrated their 5-year wedding anniversary, he, in response to the news of the long-awaited pregnancy, admitted that he fell in love with her as soon as he saw her. You know, my dear, when I was looking at the field then, the girls try not to overexert themselves, and you, so focused but not gloomy, you carefully fold this beetroot, even if you need to shake off the dirt a little. I worked with some kind of joy, and when I smiled at some joke I told, I realized that I didn't need anyone else. Tina went on maternity leave from the position of a design engineer, and Alex realized that his salary at the plant would clearly not be enough for the family. Together with his friends, he got involved in the business development. Of all the viable options, the companions chose to trade in equipment necessary for active recreation and sports. Enthusiastic young people were able to attract the attention of fishermen, athletes, as well as lovers of hiking and long trips to nature. One store was followed by another. The partners expanded the variety of goods, looked for dependable firms, and then Alex turned into Mr. Alex for his subordinates and opened a workshop for the production of goods for tourism. His own experience was useful to him, and although not many believed in his success, the business turned out to be profitable. The family didn't need anything. Beautiful daughter Kira was pleased with her father's success at school, and she went to music with pleasure. She did a little choreography for the soul. Tina, realizing that combining work, which took an hour and a half twice a day to commute to, meant little time in the status of a housewife, and then, with the full support of her husband, opened a shop with sewing goods. The family could not be counted as super rich, but material prosperity was stable. Wealth, even fortune, appeared suddenly. Once upon a time, Alex, rather from some instinct than after a rational miscalculation, bought several suburban plots for almost nothing, and then was able to successfully sell them. So he got another kind of earnings, and in addition to all his studies, he opened a real estate agency. Happy years flew by with the blink of an eye. From poor young professionals, Tina and Alex had turned into very wealthy people. We built a compact but cozy house, located so that the city is just around the corner. Now Kira's daughter had become a student. They bought her an apartment so that when she gets married, the family would not have any problems with housing. Everything had changed, but the feelings of Tina and Alex remained as tender as before, and love in general, as it seemed to them, has become even stronger. However, 2 years ago, Tina suddenly became a widow. Alex lost control on the icy road and died on the scene. Tina vaguely remembered that dark period. She tried to hold on for the sake of her daughter, who adored her father, and, in memory of her beloved husband, tried to preserve his trading and real estate business. She had to delve into a huge number of details and nuances, but such a full load helped to distract her to such an extent that she simply did not have the strength to mourn her beloved. She sometimes had the thought that now she had to pay for years of happiness. Tina sometimes moped, and during such periods did not even go outside the precinct. Fortunately, it is possible to keep an eye on the state of the business remotely, and there is always work on Earth. So, Tina worked in the garden, then in the greenhouse, finding at least some comfort in physical activities. The only people she has always had, of course, daughter Kira, Mary, her husband's younger sister, and her family. The sister-in-law was almost 17 years younger, but they communicated perfectly, having long become not only friends, but also remarkably close. During one of the meetings, when Mary decided to give herself a break from household chores and came to her brother's widow, Tina confessed to her, "You know, Mary, life probably spoiled me for a reason up to the age of 46. Most likely it was not a gift of fate, but her oversight. Now she decided to put up a severe bill for everything. Sometimes it's a sinful thing to think that I don't want anything else. That's just Kira holding, but you, I can't leave you." Don't think like that, Tina. We all feel bad without Alex, but he would definitely be unhappy with your thoughts. Moreover, Kira needs you now, the wrong one, more than ever. She has become quite an adult with us, a bride. Yesterday, I saw her with a guy in a cafe. Her eyes were shining. Her face was shining. A real beauty. So, my dear, it is probably necessary for you and me to prepare for a new joy. Mary's words hit Tina in the heart. How did she not notice any changes in her daughter? And after all, as Tina understood with annoyance now, she, as a mother, had to ask for a long time why her daughter suddenly began to return home much later. Yes, Mary, it looks like I'm a worthless mom. In fact, Kira also began to dress up longer before leaving the house. A week ago, I asked for my favorite perfume. It's awkward because she didn't come for perfume. She probably wanted to talk to me. And I waved my hand towards the dressing table saying, "Take what you want and don't bother me." Don't blame yourself, Tina. I think Kira doesn't take offense at you. She's a smart girl here. It's a pity that she is late. We would have asked her about this guy together with you. Well, I have to run. It's a pity, you know. Let's meet on Friday at 7. Take your men and come to us for the whole weekend. We, like Alex, left and we're not going to barbecue with a bathhouse. Well done, Tina. Great idea. I will warn my sons and my husband not to plan anything. We'll stay together and maybe Kira will invite her beau. They would have arranged a visit for him. Tina would have been happy to talk longer, but a taxi had already arrived for Mary, and she hurried back to her playful 3-year-old twin sons, whom she left had her husband to look after. Tina, handing her sister-in-law souvenirs for the boys, sat down to think about the upcoming conversation with her daughter. Tina, of course, realized that her wonderful daughter had grown up a long time ago. There is nothing unnatural in the appearance of Kira's beau, because when else to fall in love than at the age of 20? Once she and Alex were worried that their beautiful schoolgirl daughter would get her head turned by some classmate, but the girl somehow took the issue of admission to an interesting university very seriously. While many of her peers were already starting to meet guys in an adult way, Kira was gnawing on the granite of science, and she also helped Tina with the choice of fabrics and unusual accessories. And I must say, most often the daughter's extraordinary ideas turned out to be successful. Alex always admired Kira's diligence, and in conversations with his wife noted, "Well done, Kira," because she knew that he would have paid for her studies at any institute, and she herself decided to make her way. Memories of her husband again touched Tina's emotional wound, and she, immersed in unhappy thoughts, did not even notice how the front door slammed. Tina broke her concentration when Kira entered the kitchen, who asked in an excited voice, "Mom, why are you sitting in the dark? Is everything okay?" Tina started up, and despite the protests of her daughter, who said that she would warm up the food, she began to set the table. Tina watched with emotion as the hungry girl ate her dinner with an appetite and restrained herself with all her might not to ask Kira who she was dating. At the table, Tina asked, "I invited Mary and the guys to us for the weekend. Let's come up with something interesting and delicious besides the wings." Tina hoped that her daughter would take the opportunity to talk about her boyfriend, and the idea came true. Kira's cheeks turned slightly red, and she confessed, "Mom, I agreed to go on a date with a guy on Saturday. We met him at Catherine's when she was celebrating her driver's license." Tina smiled encouragingly, but did not ask anything, so as not to scare off the moment of frankness, and Kira continued, "His name is Stephen Kirsten. He is a cousin of the guy Bethany, so don't frown at Mommy. I've made all the inquiries. A good guy. He works. He has his own furniture store. More precisely, as Bethany said, the store belongs to her parents, according to the documents, but they entrusted it to Stephen 6 months ago. He is 30 years old, was married, but they broke up. He has no children." Did I find out all the necessary information? Tina felt pride and a certain challenge in her daughter's voice, but she bit her tongue in time, deciding not to quarrel and not to teach her grown-up blood. And with the most joyful intonation praised, just a good girl. If you want, you can invite Stephen to dinner with us on Saturday, but of course I won't say a word of reproach to you if you prefer a date. Mommy, you're just lovely. I'll probably invite Stephen, but I'm afraid he'll think I'm pushing him to propose. He seems to be making hints to me, saying that he has never met such a girl and would like to spend his whole life next to me. No, he'll definitely think I'm rushing him, so most likely I'll just quickly run off on a date. Then I'll come home to chat with Mary and tinker with the boys. I hope you'll persuade them to stay overnight, right? Tina smiled. Of course, with an overnight stay. But if you don't want to push Stephen to a decisive act, then probably you really shouldn't invite him. Wait, take a closer look at him. There's no hurry. So far, can you at least show me his picture? They probably took selfies. Of course now. Kira sat down next to her mother on the sofa and handed her smartphone. Tina flipped through the photos and realized that she did not like her daughter's boyfriend at all. No, outwardly he looked quite neat, even over the top. In one of the pictures, Tina even noticed that the man's nails were polished. But the way he looked at Kira did not suit her categorically. The negative emotions were subconscious, but Tina was simply convinced that Stephen was not in love with her daughter at all. In the morning, after Kira rushed off to study, Tina called her sister-in-law and briefly recounted the conversation with her daughter. Tina tried to explain her doubts. You know, Mary, he seems to be smiling in the pictures, but his eyes are empty. Or there was a frame where Kira does not cling, and he looks at her with such a malicious smile of a winner, a nasty type. Although, according to my daughter, he is very courteous, so I invited him to visit. Together, we will be able to ask him about everything and consider what kind of bird he is. No, Mary, Kira's right. He can also go all in, make an offer in front of everyone. It seems like so that he could do it flawlessly. Well, try to find out more about him. After discussing the problem a little more, the relatives said goodbye. Tina did not stop thinking about her daughter's fate, and the woman had an idea. She found out the address of Stephen's furniture store and ordered a taxi to its location. While waiting for the car, Tina dressed up in the clothes in which she worked in the garden, but did not have time to wash and went to the salon in the form of just a lady with low income. The pretty saleswoman Helga, who would have been more suited to the profession of a model, tried to restrain herself at the sight of a not too presentable visitor, but she could not completely hide her disappointment. Tina walked around the salon and then asked the girl, "Excuse me, Helga, can you get some kind of discount on this bedroom furniture?" The beauty's face became haughty as she said, "I'm sorry, but we don't have discounts. These are the rules of our store." Tina pretended not to notice the contempt and asked, "If possible, arrange a meeting with the owner for me. I will personally ask for a discount." After some bickering, Helga stepped aside. The girl, as Tina guessed, called Stephen's reception. And a few minutes later she informed Tina, "Go straight down the hall, then turn right. There will be a reception room. Mr. Kirsten is busy right now. Wait to get through, but I'll tell you right away, it's unlikely you'll get a discount. It's better to go to another store. We have a salon of Italian furniture, and almost all models are exclusive." Tina thanked the girl and went to the reception room, which turned out to be empty. The door to the store owner's office was ajar, but a few minutes later, a slightly disheveled secretary of no less model type than the seller came out. "Hello," Tina said politely. "Can I see Mr. Kirsten about the discount?" "Oh, I don't even know." The girl turned on her heels and looked into the office from which she had just left and asked, "There is a visitor here about a discount. Let her come to you." A loud baritone voice replied, "Not now, baby. You know, I need to come to my senses and make the coffee stronger. Tell them to wait." It became quite obvious to Tina that Kira's boyfriend had just been having fun right at the workplace, but she still decided to look at Stephen to get an idea of how he behaves with people. She had to wait for almost an hour, during which the secretary did not bother to offer her either tea or even water. Communication with Stephen also did not work out. As soon as the secretary, apparently having read the message from the boss on the computer, allowed Tina to go to the director, he barely heard the request for a discount, rudely interrupted the woman, "I don't do handouts. Go to the market somewhere. There's plywood furniture and just for a purse like yours." Tina returned home in an unbelievably bad mood. She really didn't like the fact that when dating Tina, Stephen is not at all shy about maintaining a relationship with his secretary. In addition, the manner of his conversation with potential buyers clearly indicated that the business was unlikely to last long. By connecting friends, Tina found out that the man had brought the furniture store to the brink of ruin in 6 months, and besides, he had large debts after the closure of his business. However, recently he began to ask creditors for an exceedingly small delay, explaining that he had seduced a rich girl. Very soon he would have corrected his financial situation and would return everything with interest. Tina tried to explain to Kira what Stephen was like and had to persuade the girl to bring him to a family evening on Saturday. "Daughter, I wish you only the best, so invite this person and you will see his true character." The spectacle really turned out to be enchanting. Stephen, seeing the elegant Tina, bowed and even stretched out his hand to her, and then, listening to the voice, recognized the visitor who asked for a discount. Tina invited him and said, "Well, Mr. Kirsten, come in and look at my plywood furniture." Losing his composure, the unlucky boyfriend left the store, almost sprawling on a flower bed. Even Kira couldn't help but smile as she watched Stephen flee. Tina was glad that she was able to save her from a big mistake, and Kira would definitely meet a decent man who would love her.
Muffin arrived at the school later than the others. She was undergoing a challenging course of treatment. For several years, was homeschooled. By this time, the children at the school had managed to become friends. The class developed their relationship, and the first love couples appeared. Brian was in love with Emma and sometimes walked her home. Paul was inseparable from Anna. Steve spent a long time unsuccessfully courting the class's top hottie, Sophia. However, all the boys loved Sophia, even from other classes. She was beautiful, blonde, with green eyes. Sophia was not very successful in her studies, although she was very successful with the boys. She was the recognized queen of the class. On that day, 2 students, Muffin and Fred Crane, came to the school. Fred immediately attracted the attention of the entire class. A humble guy with dark hair and a friendly smile, whom both teachers and girls and even boys liked. He was well-versed in all the lessons, was polite, friendly, and did not participate in conflicts. He treated all warmly and affably. Surprisingly, he did not pay much attention to the beautiful Sophia. The queen of the class is accustomed to the increased awareness of boys. She wondered why the new Fred was friendly to Lisa, Stephanie, and Judy. He treated Sophia like everyone else, warm, kind, and nothing more. In the beginning, Muffin didn't even attract the students' attention. Everyone was busy discussing Fred's appearance and preparing for Stephanie's party. Muffin was sitting next to Fred. 2 new students sat together, but did not pay attention to each other. It is not surprising that no one remembered Muffin. No one knew her name, although teachers approached her. A lumbering body, fat legs, thick cheeks and colorless hair. That's what the new girl looks like. She didn't bother anyone, answered the teacher's questions, and didn't talk to anyone. The nickname, Muffin, stuck to her at once. No one remembered that the colorless girl was called Heather. She did not interest anyone. Soon it turned out that Heather had unpleasant breathing. When she was anxious or rushing, she began to breathe unnaturally. The girl put a tube in her mouth during the attack, restoring her breath. This caused her to be squeamish. She was called a muffin because of her loose body and plump face. At first, everyone was indifferent to her. Her classmates simply did not notice her. The situation escalated when it became clear that Fred was sympathetic to Heather. No, he was not in love with her. It was impossible to fall in love with a loose, colorless creature with unpleasant breath. But he treated her well. The girl could easily share her school supplies if Fred didn't hear the assignment. Some topics that Heather didn't understand, Fred could explain to her. It wasn't friendship, but relations with her desk mates were good. The beginning of the feud was Sophia. A pretty girl in the class could not forgive an ordinary girl for the attention of a good guy. One day, Sophia offered Fred to sit next to her in class, but the guy refused. He politely replied that he had arranged with Heather to do a joint project. Beauty harbored evil. From that moment on, Heather was no longer just an unremarkable girl. She became the true enemy of the class queen. You can't say that Sophia was madly in love with Fred, but the friendly guy turned out to be inaccessible to her. He was not under the spell of the beauty. He communicated with Sophia just as he talked to Stephanie, Anna, Emma, and even Muffin. One day, the first unpleasant situation occurred. That day, Sophia was in a perfect mood. She was wearing a bright red sweater and blue jeans. These clothes suited the girl very much. The beauty had a good mood. On this day, she was in the mood to joke about Heather. "What is it?" said Sophia, and she poked Heather's backpack with a delicate finger. The girl looked timidly at the queen of the class. She did not understand what the angry beauty wanted from her. Sophia squeamishly poked her knapsack with her fingernail. "It's mud," she said, ringing and laughing. The other guys were laughing too. "That's not dirt," said Heather quietly. "There you go, mud. It's like dough." Sophia kept laughing. Her beautiful eyes were shining. The laughter was ringing. At that point, she was more beautiful than usual. "Bread dough." Steve laughed angrily. Everyone liked the joke so much that laughter filled the audience. Heather became worried and began to breathe heavily. She was depressed and hurt. Fred did not laugh with everyone, but did not stand up for the girl. When Heather began to suffocate, Sophia began to intimidate her. She stuck out her tongue and began to breathe loudly. The guys started to laugh even more. "Dough for Muffin! Dough for Muffin!" said Steve. The other guys started shouting that phrase too. Fred got a little confused. He was uncomfortable with the situation. Fred felt terrible for Bread, but could not stand up to the whole class. He thought he should have supported the poor girl, but he didn't know how to help her. Fred was scattered over the books on his desk. The girl got better. Soon the lessons began. Fred couldn't concentrate on the task. He thought Heather was mad at him. "She'll probably never talk to me again," the guy thought. He didn't know if it was good or bad. Sometimes he regretted getting so close to Muffin. Befriending an outcast girl robbed him of many joys. But he couldn't break up with her. Somehow she touched his heart. Muffin was very different from the other girls of that age. She was kind and understanding. She made him feel comfortable. Like the other boys at school, Fred liked Sophia very much, but something about Heather made her tender and made him want to take care of her. He didn't want to take care of Sophia. Fred sat the whole lesson and did not look at Heather, but at the end of the study, he felt her hand touch his elbow. "Fred, I've lost my pencil. Can you give me yours?" Heather whispered. A wave of relief came over Fred. He was happy that the girl had found a reason to talk to him. He gladly gave her a pencil and crossed her eyes. Heather was smiling. He wanted so much to do something for her, and soon he had an opportunity to do something good for her. Unfortunately, good intentions have come to naught. There was a lot of talk in class about Stephanie's party. A classmate was gathering guests at her house for the weekend. Her parents left town and let her daughter call her friends. Stephanie gave everyone a bright invitation card. Muffin and Fred got invited too. Heather was holding a colorful card. Fred heard the girl sigh. "Do you want to go?" he asked the neighbor with a smile. "No, of course," said Heather sadly. "Why?" said Fred. In his head, he scolded himself for asking. He understood that the gentle, shy girl with her appearance should not have come to the party. There were going Sophia, Emma, and Anna. These are real sharks that could hurt vulnerable Heather. At the same time, Fred understood how much she wanted to have fun. After all, this has never happened in her life. Perhaps she wanted to wear a beautiful dress and have fun with friends. She just did not have any good friends, and she deserved fun and some friends. "Come with me," Fred asked the girl, looking into her eyes. Heather's cheeks were covered with blush. She looked at the boy with huge, colorless eyes, with wonder and hope. At that moment, she was almost beautiful, but after a second, the hope in her eyes disappeared. The girl mentally returned to reality. "Thanks, Fred. I'm not going," said Heather, pretending to read. The boy felt a strong desire to make the girl happy. He thought that if Heather came to this party, the guys would see her qualities. They would appreciate her kindness and sincerity. He determined to help Heather. "You're coming with me, and it's out of the question," said Fred firmly. And then he added, "I want you to wear the most beautiful dress. Do you have one?" "Yes, actually," said Heather with a happy smile. Sometimes she was invited to holidays, but when she refused, no one insisted or talked her into it. On that day, Stephanie Adams' house was full of young guests. Loud music was playing. Sophia came in a bright green dress. It was very shining in her emerald eyes. The figure of the girl was great. The guys looked at her shapes with lust, but she did not pay attention to anyone. Sophia had a clear plan to get close to Fred. She was sure that the obstacle to their love was Heather. He spent so much time with an unattractive, ugly, pity girl from a pitiful school. There was simply no way to communicate with Fred without her in class. Today is a great chance because there will be no ugly muffin next to him, thought Sophia. She was beautiful today. Sophia was sure that Fred would come. He was a little late. The guys were all gathered and making a lot of noise. Sophia looked at the door. She was waiting for Fred. No one was expecting what happened next. Amid the fun, Fred entered the house. He was wearing a suit that suited him very well. He was holding Heather's hand. All the guys looked at the strange couple with surprise. The muffin looked strange. The dress was beautiful, but not very good for a total girl. The makeup was not on her. Her hair was neat and attractive, but colorless. Heather smiled affably. Her smile was timid. Stephanie was surprised but invited the guests to join the company. The first half hour was good. Everyone continued to do their business. At first, no one noticed the queen of Sophia's class was in a bad mood. Fred never left her side, serving her drinks and sandwiches. He even tried to involve a shy girl in the conversation. It was time to dance. Fred was going to invite Heather, but Sophia was cleverly ahead of him. She went up to the guy and asked him to dance. Heather nodded timidly. The whole dance, Sophia snuggled up to the boy. He liked her. He didn't want to turn into a timid admirer of the entourage of the recognized queen. Fred mentally noted how beautiful Sophia was today. She was so temptingly snuggled up to him. He did not notice that the dance was over and the next song began. In the second slow song, he danced with beautiful Sophia. At the end of the second dance, he thought he did not want to return to Heather. He even regretted taking her with him on such a day. She prevented him from having fun with her presence. He could dance and have fun with the beautiful Sophia. Instead, he had to take care of Heather. Fred apologized to Sophia and went to Heather. Steve approached the beauty. He had long been in love with Sophia, but resentful, Sophia pushed the guy away. "Can't you see that your Fred is stuck to a muffin? He doesn't want you," he said to Sophia. This was the humiliation the girl could not stand. Sophia jumped up to Heather and yanked her arm, screaming, "Why did you come to this party? You were not expected here. You are an ugly, stupid creature." All the guys began to look at what would happen next. Heather looked at the furious beauty. Sophia continued, "You're ruining everyone's life. Scary people like you should stay at home and not go to cool parties." Heather got excited. She started to breathe heavily. Fred helped her take the medication to help her live. He gave her the tube. All the guys were looking at him. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't respond to Sophia rudely. He didn't want to take care of Heather anymore. She was really in his way. She was a stranger at the party. But Fred wasn't mad at himself for bringing a girl with him. He was angry with her. She was breathing so severely, her ugliness didn't even save a beautiful dress. Heather's breath was back to normal. What happened next surprised everyone. Heather got up, looked at everyone with colorless eyes, and said quietly, "You're all evil, cruel people here. I came here only because of Fred. He is the only kind and noble man among you. I will leave, and he will leave with me. I am happy at your school because I met this guy. He is not like you. When we graduate, he will be married and have many beautiful, intelligent, kind children." At first, they listened to her in silence, but at the end of her speech, there was laughter. Sophia burst out. Her laughter was loud and contagious. Then Steve and Stephanie and the other guys started laughing. Fred was silent. The guys weren't just laughing at Heather, they were teasing him too. They mocked him because of Muffin. Fred jumped up and yelled at Heather, "Shut up! Shut up! You are a stupid, disgusting creature. Shut up! I only brought you here because I felt sorry for you. Look at you. You're ugly and stupid." Heather fell silent in fear. Then her breathing became uneven again. She was helping herself breathe the drug, but it was no longer helping. The girl began to suffocate. At first, everyone laughed at her situation. The shortness of breath of a fat girl looked funny. Someone even mimicked her. Emma was the first to notice that Heather had become quite ill. She called the ambulance. An emergency came quickly, but the girl was already unconscious. Heather was taken away to hospital. No one knew what happened next with Heather. The next day, she didn't come to school. She didn't go to school with the guys anymore. No one even talked about Muffin anymore. It became taboo. All the guys understood they were involved in something terrible. The years passed, and everyone slowly forgot about the colorless girl. Fred and Sophia became a couple. After graduation, they married. Sophia was a demanding girl, and her young husband did not have enough money for her desires. She constantly talked about him finding a job. The relationship between the couple was not always perfect. The young wife was scandalous and capricious. Soon, Sophia came home with flaming eyes. The prestigious company was recruiting young employees. Sophia forced Fred to submit his resume. The girl sent her resume too. Working in a prestigious company was very well paid. If they could both get a job at the office of this organization, they could buy a house right away. Unfortunately, no one replied to their CVs. Sophia wrote letters to the organization, but the company sent them a polite refusal. After a month, a persistent girl still managed to get a meeting with the head of the company. Sophia was convinced that she and Fred were skilled professionals. She believed that ordinary people were mistakenly refusing them. At the interview, Sophia and Fred came together. The organization was located in a beautiful building with modern renovations. The guys were taken to a luxurious office to the head. A beautiful young woman in an elegant costume offered Fred and Sophia a gesture to sit down. Something subtly familiar was on her face. "My name is Heather Donnelly. I am listening to you," said the lady. The name also seemed familiar to the guys. Sophia immediately presented the documents and began to tell the company director about their capabilities. She spoke for herself and her husband. Fred was silent. Sophia said a lot. Heather Donnelly listened to her attentively. "Why are you so silent?" said Fred's lady with a smile. With that smile, she turned everything upside down on him. He recognized Muffin. But how did she change? She became subtle, graceful. It was an impossible change for her. The face was hers, but at the same time completely different. She had a lovely look with expressive blue eyes. Her hair was blonde in a sharp bundle. Fred was struggling to breathe. Heather Donnelly asked anxiously, "Are you all right, Mr. Crane? Are you having trouble breathing? Should I call our doctor?" Fred shook his head negatively. His breathing was still heavy. Sophia was displeased that her husband looked so ridiculous at the time. "I had an asthma medication with me years ago, but I don't need it anymore. So if it's hard for you, I can call our doctor. Unfortunately, I don't have any medicine with me," the manager continued. Fred refused help. He was distraught. He remembered everything. He remembered the naive, ugly Muffin. He remembered how Sophia was torturing her. He remembered betraying a quiet, humble girl. "Heather," he whispered. The wife glanced at Fred angrily, and at that moment, she also got struck. Sophia's face turned red. "Muffin," she whispered. Heather smiled with restraint. "Yes, we know each other, and now, unfortunately, we do not need specialists for your profile. Our staff is already sufficiently staffed. We hired employees with higher qualifications, but you were so persistent, I can only offer you a position of service staff, but I think you will decline." Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. "Of course we won't take it," she roared. She was a qualified professional. Heather dared offer her the role of a maid, cleaner, or dishwasher. Sophia jumped out of her chair and ran to the exit. She gestured to Fred. Before leaving, Fred met Heather's light blue eyes. Her gaze expressed pity. There was no past resentment or anger in that look. But there was no longer the trust that Fred had in her many years ago. She forgave the betrayal. Fred was struck with terrible remorse. The couple was driving home in a taxi. Sophia hissed angrily at her husband. She was furious that a former classmate had done this to them. She was even angrier that Muffin had become successful and beautiful. She even thought that Fred's feelings for Heather had been awakened. And Fred rode in silence. His soul was tormented with remorse. He saw and remembered those blue eyes. He knew he would never forget them again. And Fred knew he'd never be able to look at his wife with love again.